I often get asked, I want to be a VP of CX. I want to be a chief customer officer like you someday. And if you want that, you're going to have to learn.
Customer experience wisdom, a dash of travel talk. We've been cleared for takeoff.
The best meals are served outside and require a passport.
What would you think if I told you today's guest made me think of a pop song from the late 70s, early 80s? Remember that song Pop Music by M? Don't worry, I'm not going to sing it. You can thank me later, and I certainly don't have the budget to afford the royalties, so you're just going to have to imagine. New York, London, Paris music. Everybody talk about pop music coming to mind? Well, I know that's what came to mind when today's guest, Tabitha Dunn, a global CX leader who's built and led customer experience strategies and teams across some of the world's biggest companies, started sharing all of the places she'd worked. That song immediately came to mind. Japan, London, Zurich, Germany, Sweden. Now can you see why it came to mind? With that global experience, she's seen firsthand how CX plays out across different cultures and industries. Tabitha takes that variety and uses it to understand the unique challenges of each business, navigating roadblocks and making CX work in the real world. Right now, she's focused on the intersection of customer experience and resilience, how leaders adapt, influence, and push through obstacles to create real change. I want to know more. Tabitha, welcome to CX Passport.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rick.
I'm glad to have you here. Tabitha, I'm just going to ask you, did that song come to mind at all for you when you're thinking about the world in which you've traveled?
You know, it didn't, but now that you had mentioned it, it's going to be hard to get out of my head. That is
Yeah.
for sure.
I'm glad to give you that gift of a little earworm, and hopefully listeners, viewers, that's an earworm for y'all as well. Well, let's talk about all of that variety. When you've been all around the world, what have you learned about the differences and the similarities of a customer experience approach in all of those destinations?
Mm. So one of the things that I think helps is that I grew up as a military brat.
Okay.
So before I was 10, I lived more outside the US than I did inside the US.
Huh.
And so having that experience, having lived in multiple parts of the US, in the Midwest and the South, East Coast, I was born on the West Coast, lived in two countries. My grandfather was a lockmaster on the Panama Canal, and I'd gone to visit him.
Cool.
It's sort of, it is pretty cool, but it means that you're both very portable.
Yeah.
It also has a hilarious effect that depending on what country I was in, when I learned that word, I sometimes say it based on where I learned the word or where I heard it. Like maybe I heard it on British television, so
Okay.
it sounds a little more like that. And the reason I say that is because that's how experiences are. Let's say that you are serving customers in many different countries. You might want to think of them as a monolithic entity. And the Japanese don't like to take surveys, so we can't do surveys there. Or the Spanish tend to give very positive, more maybe inflated scores. We might make those assumptions just on things like voice of customer, not even including the fact that service experiences are very different in each of those countries. But they're also not a monolithic entity, right? So that
Right.
means that when you treat the experience there, you have to understand the broader cultural needs, but you also have to recognize it's not just Spaniards who live in Spain. It's many of us who are either imports for a few years or immigrants to the country. So it's not just a case of understanding those broader cultural intentions, but it's also recognizing that customers need to be treated as individuals with an expectation of what those needs are.
Boy. So we're talking about that in the context of global distribution of culture and geography. This is true when we're talking about inside of a company's understanding of its customer base. How have you applied your experiences with that across the world into how you might, when you're talking inside of a company and helping them understand, look, your customers are unique. How do you help them understand and act in a way that appreciates that uniqueness of their customers?
I think a practical story is often the best way to explain it because theory might feel like, oh, well, how do I apply that to me?
Right.
So I'll give an example that most companies who have a phone support model will do a lot to try and reduce the call volume to support because every
Mm,
call you make to their support is expensive, correct?
right.
And there's the long running argument of you should hide the phone number or should you not hide it. And yeah, see, I can feel you sighing already, right? And the
Ooh, starting to get
creativity
angry.
people go through, right? And what's interesting is they look at the problem entirely the wrong way. They look at it from, we want a lower call volume, but of course we're here to help our customers. That's
Mm,
generally the point of view. But instead of looking at it as the customers have certain behaviors you solve in different ways and build the channel to that resolution, you'll actually reduce your call volume and increase customer sat. So a project to do this, where I've done this before, is you add a single question to your support survey. Ideally, make your support survey like less than 5 questions. So this
sure.
question gets answered. And you say to them, you know what? I just need to know one thing. Did you try to solve this problem before contacting us?
Hmm.
Yes or no? The idea being that everybody who said no, you should set that customer base aside because that's a different problem to solve. However, the ones who said yes, you know all the problems they called in with already. What you should do is work with your support team to say, out of those, which ones are easy to solve? And we just need to work to better improve
Mm.
how we offer solutions to that. And which ones of those are actually rather hard to solve? And by the way, if it's hard to solve, you should even open the top of the knowledge base entry with something like, you can attempt the resolution below, but it'll be faster if you call us. Here's our phone number.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! You just blew my mind with that. I can't even imagine seeing at the top of a FAQ like a, "Hey, great question. Why are you reading this? Give us a call." Like I can't.
Right? I mean, you can if you really want to. And my
Yeah.
husband's super technical, so he'd be the one like, I got to give it at least a one try, right? But that means you've set it up for that, but you've already set the expectation. You could be frustrating yourself if you try it. We could help you through it faster. It's thinking about human behavior and meeting them where they're at and
Interesting.
teaching a company how to do that is how you meet individual needs, but do them in like segments, in chunks of
Yeah.
customer needs.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Interesting. Okay. Well, it that shows me that depth of understanding of customers as individual, unique pieces, right? That global experience and just the general sense of, hey, this is an individual we're dealing with, not a persona, not a monolithic block or anything like that. You've had to bring that spirit into many customer experience teams because you've built multiple teams from the ground up. I want to start with that beginning, getting started phase. How do you go about getting these teams off the ground? How do you sell the idea? And then how do you tactically get going with this?
It often starts with a discussion with the leadership team when I get hired. In my first 100 days, I will interview probably several hundred people across the company,
Wow.
as well as dive deep into customers. You need to start with what's working well and why is it working well? And the reason that's important is that might be a repeatable experience you can make.
Right.
Or when you fix things, you've got to make sure you don't break that. And it's amazing how many times that as CX experts, we end up focusing on everything that's broken and not thinking about, does it work right anywhere? Like, and why is that valuable to our customers and our people?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the second part is what's not working well and why. But there's another question after that that people miss, which is when it goes wrong for the customer, what is the impact on them and their business?
Okay.
Keep in mind, I work in B2B,
Yeah,
but if you work
right.
in B2C, obviously the question is the impact on you and your life when it goes wrong. And the reason that's important is because if you're trying to measure which problems to solve first, sometimes you might think you're going to solve a problem that happens often. But if the impact to the customer is small, you might actually choose to solve a problem that doesn't happen very often,
Right.
but when it does, the impact is huge. Or maybe you solve it because the impact's small for the customer, but the impact for the company is huge.
Right.
So understanding the impact when it goes wrong is a critical part of that problem solving path. Because one of the things people go is, how do you even set priorities? That's how you start to set priorities.
Yeah.
And the third piece is I'm looking to find out, describe for me, what's the experience we want our customers to have? And then how far away do you think we are from that?
Okay.
And the reason that part of the conversation is so important, particularly at the leadership level, is if the leadership team is not aligned on even describing what it should be,
Right.
that's a problem you have to fix, right? Because that means that if they care enough to have a description and their descriptions are different, how could they be headed towards the same goal?
Boy, and that gets into like things of brand promise, and do they understand even what the company is trying to be or deliver for the customer? The one that you were describing earlier, where it was not understanding the why or the impact, I feel like I see that a lot. I feel like that the response to decide what is the highest priority tends to be what's loudest, what's most frequent. Why do you think companies are making that mistake?
I think part of the challenge is it seems easy. There's an impression that you don't actually need someone who's an expert in this space. If you just know what the problems are and you go solve them, then why would you need a CX leader to do it?
Okay.
And part of it is that why, right, is the ability to really balance out the whys and the impacts and be able to make much more strategic decisions. Because honestly, if all you do is fix the squeaky wheels, you'll never be done. But you'll also never be sure if you're having the impact you want. And once you get a list of like what you think are the most impactful things to fix from a pain perspective, then you have to do the ROI. You have to say, well, gee, how expensive is it going to be to fix this problem? Because sometimes it might be that it is in the top 10 to get fixed, but the amount of time and money it would take to fix it, the return on the investment is quite low, or it's negative. Maybe we'll fix that later, because there are things that have a better return on investment now. And it's that ability to make those thoughtful, analytical decisions along with the empathetic design of solutions that really need CX.
Tabitha, I referenced resilience in the introduction. We know that some are born with that strength of resilience. Others, well, they need to develop it. And I know that everyone, myself included, would benefit from growing that resilience. How have you built that in yourself? And then how have you guided others to build that resilience?
I don't know whether I was born with it, but I do know that I had a tough childhood. And I would say that moving very often gave me the opportunity to recognize that even when something's bad now, it won't be bad forever. And that when something is difficult or it's emotionally challenging, which it can definitely be both at work at the same time, I have to be able to sit down and focus on what can I change and what can I not change. And I think that those things, if being able to separate those two out gives you the ability to have resilience. And it's often thinking sideways and around corners when it comes to solving problems that gives you resilience. Because I think what most people struggle with is they feel like they've hit a wall and therefore there's no path forward. And I often describe CX as it's a journey to get people to the other side of a mountain. Every project I've ever started, there's a group of people and we've got to get to that goal on that other side. And if you could build that straight through, beautiful tunnel right through the middle of the mountain that would get to the other side, it'd be the fastest, easiest, most repeatable way. But if you can't get 100% of the people with you to go that route, then you have to go up the mountain, down the mountain, circle the mountain 15 times, backtrack. You have to go the path that gets everybody with you along the journey. And so if you learn that, like, we have to do this together, then you have to think about each individual, just like we think about our customers, and say, wow, why is it that when I try to work with finance, it seems like all I hit is no?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what matters to the finance team? What matters to the CFO? How can I help them be successful? What problems can we solve for them that make us better partners? How do I better understand that if I'm going to ask them for money, they should trust me that that's going to be money well spent, and they should rather spend that money with me and my team than spend it anywhere else. So if I understand that I'm facing struggles, but so is every one of the other leaders in the business, that gives me the ability to recognize I'm actually not alone, and we can be resilient together. We just have to figure it out.
We're going to take a little break here. Join me in the First Class Lounge. We'll move quickly and have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
Oh, goodness. That is difficult because when our daughter was about age 10, at this point she's 22, we wanted her to be able to spend more time with her cousins. So we did amazing trips, like staying in a tiny little village in the south of France, which was an incredible memory.
Nice.
We had an amazing time when we went to Italy. It was both fascinating because we went and explored the history there, but there was also like a fire, and watching the resilience of the local area, like as they fought this forest fire for days, and it actually enabled us to really get to see the people. It's just every single one of them are family trips.
That's the theme we'll go with. Dream travel location from your past is one that involved family and brought the family into that experience. I knew that would be a hard question for you. Well, this one might be hard too. What's a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
That is a long list. In some cases, it's going back to places that we have been. And seeing something we didn't get to see. Like
right.
My family and I are huge Disney fans. When we lived in Stockholm, COVID happened, so we missed out on the chance to do Disney Paris.
Okay.
So like if we go back to France, it's going to be Disney Paris. My husband and I want to go back to Stockholm and see our friends. But I also have this abiding desire to do an amazing whiskey and castle tour through Scotland.
Amen. Okay.
Yeah, right? And
if you need a porter, I'm right there with you.
Right. And I want to go drink real Guinness in Ireland and go and explore the country. I want to go to New Zealand. And okay, I admit it, I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. I think we're sensing I'm a bit of a geek. And so, it's such an incredible list. Like the world is an amazing place.
It's a
There's
hard
also
one.
all these places in the US that I haven't visited yet that I can't wait to go to.
I get my eyes open when I'm speaking to guests that are outside of the U.S., and frequently they'll mention a dream travel location that they've not been to yet as something inside the U.S., and we tend to, whatever our country is, and I don't think this is unique to U.S. people. It's probably true to someone who's a Parisian, and they just think, well, this is just my town, whereas for many that would be a bucket trip. And so that idea, there's a lot of things that are amazing here. I'm just going to keep peppering you with hard questions, even in what is supposed to be the softball section of the the episode. You've been all over the world. You've tasted the entire world. What is a favorite thing of yours to eat?
I'm going to have to say it's probably French food.
Okay. Hello, Parisians.
And not the super, I love, fancy French food has its place, but I love like country French food.
Right.
I'm probably, if you give me an amazing Sauvignon Blanc or Sancerre, and one of those big platters with like the different charcuterie and fromage and a great loaf of French bread, and I am your girl.
So I was a backpacker in 1995 on a $50 a day budget, so couldn't afford a whole lot when we were traveling there. And some of the best meals were at the French countryside random place. And it wasn't you ordered wine, it just whatever carafe was put on your table was what you'd be having. I imagine there's something in your list in your past that you were forced to eat growing up, but you hated as a kid. What was that? that?
So I think a lot of parents struggle to get their children to eat vegetables, right?
Yes.
But I actually loved a certain set of vegetables when I was a kid. But for some reason, I've hated sweet potatoes my whole life.
You and I are best friends.
See? And I think I was 11 or 12, and it was Thanksgiving. And my mom comes from the deep South, and she always said, you have to have like a big spoonful of everything off the table, and you have to finish your plate before you can have dessert.
Right.
And that year, she always made sweet potatoes, and she thought she made it better. She made the kind with the marshmallows on top, and I was just like, oh, no.
Can't
Don't do it to me.
Yeah.
And so I fought her. I'm like, look, I will have double helpings of every other vegetable. I just don't want the sweet potatoes. Like I was negotiating at 11. And she was like, nope, you're going to eat it. I put it on your plate. You have to eat it. And I actually fell asleep at the table, and I wouldn't leave. I did not eat the sweet potatoes, and I have not had them
That's
since.
awesome. Tabitha, you and I are definitely best friends when it comes to sweet potatoes, and already best friends with the whiskey tour in Scotland and the real Guinness. So we're doing well here. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave the first class lounge. Tabitha, what is one travel item, not including your phone, not including your passport, that you will not leave home without?
I would have to say it's probably the thing that I don't ever leave home without, which is my Kindle. I read 2 or 3 books a week, and to leave without my Kindle would feel like somebody had chopped off my arm. So I can't imagine going without a book.
Kindle, love that. Love the ability to just stop down no matter where you are in the world and enjoy a little bit of reading. You know, in the customer experience world, there has been a ton of change over the last few years. What does the future look like for customer experience? How are the new trends that you're seeing at the leadership level influence that future of work?
There are 2 sides to that answer. I'll take the leadership side first. And
Okay.
I often get asked by people who are like, well, I want to be a VP of CX. I want to be a chief customer officer like you someday. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. But if you want that, you're going to have to learn and have a background in running other parts of the business. Most senior leaders own multiple functions. They don't just own one single smaller function. They have a larger footprint. And in my last role, I had responsibility for technology, for global sales and marketing, and I did strategic planning for our big accounts. And prior to that, I owned global sales operations. And so being able to own multiple functions and be that versatile leader, that's really what you need when you get to that level. If I take the harder part, like what is the future of CX for both us as a field, as well as how will companies go about this? I think that in some ways we've done ourselves a disservice because we've been so focused on what the customer voice is, and that if we're holding the customer voice sacred in some way, like we represent them, if we're representing the voice of the customer, therefore the business has to listen. Okay. And I think for customer experience to really take its place as a predominantly important function in majority of the businesses across the globe, we have to be more purposeful. The results have to be not, this is what the customers are saying. That's the first baby step. The results the business are looking for is, how are you going to make our business run better? If you are a CX professional today and you are not a certified change management person, you are missing out, because that's the whole point of CX, is successful and impactful positive change.
What I love is when you started that answer, I was sitting there going, ooh, boy, the pitchforks and torches are going to come out. It's not about voice of the customer. And you didn't say that exactly, but right. And your point, though, and that's what I love how you carried it forward into, it's not just what the customer says, it's what you do with it. It's what the business results are. All of that is so good. And you're taking this forward. What's next for you? What vision do you have set for you for that next great customer experience adventure?
For me, the next stage is, where is that next opportunity to help a company, the employees, the leaders, and the customers transform their culture, transform their business, and help them with that scale, that growth, and that opportunity to transform in a customer-centric way.
We're going to end it right there. That's it. Like that is exactly, I love that that's sort of the last word, because what an ambition, what a vision. And that should be true of Tabitha. It should be true of almost anyone who is desiring to do something in that customer experience field. Tabitha, if folks wanted to get to know a little bit more about you, your approach to customer experience, your history, share that distaste of sweet potatoes with you, how should they get in touch? What would be the best way for them to get to know more?
It is easy to find me on LinkedIn. If you reach out, then I'm happy to reach back and connect
Awesome.
and talk.
I'll get Tabitha's LinkedIn profile, scroll down in the notes, and you will see Tabitha's LinkedIn profile. Tabitha, I did appreciate the journey that you took me on today and our listeners, that getting into the resilience, the global reality that teaches us that even in spite of what we might think a culture is, there are individual customers inside of that, and why that matters, not just for a global culture, but for a company as they think about their customer base. And even the conversation around what is next for customer experience, so valuable. I really appreciate it. Tabitha, thank you for being on CX Passport.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. If you like today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. Click subscribe on the CX Passport YouTube channel or your favorite podcast app. Next, leave a comment below the video or a review in your favorite podcast app so others can find and enjoy CX Passport too. Then head over to cxpassport.com for show notes and resources that can help you create tangible business results by delivering great customer experience. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.